Okay, hi Dr. Vaughn. I don't know, something is wrong with my webcam, and for some reason I can't read my response at the same time video or do a video on the laptop. So I'm going to read my response from my phone drive. For the Brunner book for chapters 1 to 3, this is my response. For chapter 1, um, it discusses Meyer's Ranch as a site of tourist realism, and it is closely connected with tourist commodities. Mass tourism concerns itself with bringing historical events back to life by enacting such performances for economic purposes. Example: the Meyer's Ranch is a mass tourist site as it enacts historical master narratives of the savage Maasai and the civilized colonizer, which caters to the imagination of others by creating the imperialist nostalgia, which is cited by Rosaldo 1989. Um, Rosaldo 1989 said it is not only a site for reproduction of historical enactments, but also the inclusion of tourist itineraries, performance, production, and marketing of them. According to McConnell 1976, semiotic of attraction can be defined as the tourist struggle of crisis concerning modernity from the lens of tourism, which Brunner does not agree with. He now talks about pastoralism and the Moran. The mayor's ranch is tailored to the requirements of both the tourist production and the Maasai youth performance of culture. The landscape and the lawn. East Africa is portrayed as an untamed is an as an untouched landscape, which is contrasted to the which is contrasted in the to the mayor's garden along with its British bloom. The mayor's garden represents four thematic structure of East African tourism references. Example: the Garden of Eden, the allusion of prehistoric man before civilization. The tourist views the safari model as a journey to the Garden of Eve when man had not evolved from his ape form. And the European grounds of the Mayan Ranch symbolize the dawn of civilization. The Gorilla Safari discusses how the Western tourist has a pre-tour image of what the Gorilla Safari is about, which is the return to primitive civilization, which is unexplored and untapped by man, and to encounter man in his ape form. For example, McLaren engaged in this tourist activity specifically to get back to the roots of nature, which the tourist brochure advertised, and the tourist gorillas are part of the promised tour, and subsequently became part of nature along with the tourists. Um, Age set system. Bronner discusses how the age system of the Maasai boys are used by the mayors for description purposes to the tourists who visit the sites. The mayors give an accurate description of how the various age group system of and how the Maasai boys attain manhood, including the tasks which the Maasai boys have to perform to uh, 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 which the Maasai boys perform to attain uh, every level of manhood. The mayors utilize features that are culturally appealing to tourists and corresponds with the Maasai way of life. However, Brunner added that the adequate description of the Maasai boys sometimes contradicts. For example, the young warriors could have an education if they desired, as it was offered by the Kenyan government. Brunner also said that there are some moral practices which have been banned by the government are what is appealing to tourists, such as the killing of lions and cattle raiding, as the government has banned all these activities because it is of the opinion that these acts impede development on the people. Movement through the border zone. Brunner discusses how on the Maya Ranch there is no there is no confusion between the tourists and the performers. In this border zone, the activities for tourists are scheduled from the arrival time on the ranch to the movement from the English lawn to the Manyata to the performance by the Maasai people and the sale of souvenirs sold by the Maasai people, and then the return to the lawn, aka civilization, where they are served black by a black staff, by a black chef, which is to reinforce the racist stereotype. In this border zone, the interaction is limited between the performers and the tourists themselves, and instead the mayors answer questions about the Maasai culture and people, instead of the Maasai people directly having contact between themselves and the tourists. And I believe that this is wrong, because instead the Maasai people, the mayors cannot know more about the culture than the people themselves. And so I believe that instead the mayors should have given an opportunity to the Maasai people to interact with the tourists. Tourist realism. The mayors present to the tourists the master narrative of colonialism in Africa. The mayors represent the British, who are saviors and bringers of civilization and education to the Kenyan people, while the Maasai people are portrayed as people who are rebels and are opposed to change that both the colonialists and modern government brought. The mayors and the Maasai present a picture of the colonialists and the ruled living in harmony before independence. Both people exist in two binaries: civilized and uncivilized, nature and arid ground. Um, Brunner argued that from the view of the Western story, it seems that the mayors exploited the Maasai for economic purposes. However, both the Maasai and the mayors argued that both parties were not being exploited, as the Maasai love to perform for the tourists and earn money for their livestock, while for the mayors, the money earned from the tours are used to maintain their farm and homestead. And Jane, the lady in charge of the performance on the Mayor Ranch, sees it as a way of preserving the authenticity of the Maasai people. She feels that she's helping them and doing a favor by preserving and presenting their culture of what she thinks it is to Western tourists. Excuse me. Um, in chapter 2, Bernard gives us an insight into how the Maasai people are presented to tourists in three different sides in the tourism industry. He argued that in the tourist industry, there is a monolithic view of different cultures of the world, and those monolithic views are the dominant narratives, such as the Balinese people who live in a magical land. Brunner argued that these cultures have a synonymously identified with the narratives that people feel to have been synonymously identified with such narratives that people have refused to look to find out other discourses about these people's about the cultures that are about other aspects of their culture. Instead, they only focus on the master narrative. Brunner gives us details of the three sites used in tourism concerning the Maasai, which are the Mayor's Ranch, the Bomas National Folklore Troupe, and the Sundowner. The three sites have different meaning for the Kenyan people. The Mayor Ranch is seen as reproducing historical colonial phase, which the Kenyans see as degrading to their culture. The Bomas Folklore Troupe The Bomas Folklore Troupe are seen as a celebration of culture and independence from British imperialism, and they cater to the needs of the citizens, the Kenyan citizens, while the mayor's ranch caters to the Western tourists. The Southerner is a representation of tourists who want exclusive rights and favors to see the Maasai people perform. And in this at the Southerners uh, performance, there is an interaction between the Maasai and the Southerners. There is, unlike in the, I can see there are so many similarities and contrasts. Like in the Maya Ranch and the Southerners, like the the Maya Ranch, they do not allow the mayors never allowed the performers to have contact with with the tourists, except when it came to dancing and sale of souvenirs. While in the while the Maasais in the Southerner performers have become adapted to Western tourists, and so it's like there is room for interaction between both tourist and performer, unlike the Maya Ranch. And also in the Bomas national troop, there is a schedule, there is an understanding between both parties, the performers and the tourists, that this is a performance, and also like is controlled by the government, so there is no really interaction between performers and tourists as such. Bonner also argued about the main differences between these three sides, as um okay. Yes, Burma's troop is this okay. Bronner argued that the main differences between these three sites are how the transportation that people used to get, tourists used to get to this site. For the Maya Ranch and the Boma Troop, public transportation or tour buses are used by by the the tourists to go visit this site, while the Southerner, it goes beyond borders. They don't, in fact, they do not use any borders. They surpass both land and air border as they move from one game reserve to another to watch and see performance of different cultures. Okay, and Bernard also mentioned certain terms that are not that are used by the Bomas cultural troop. Tribe, for example, uh, tribe is the equivalent of the people or subgroup. Tribal is abhorred by Kenyans, and it symbolizes primitiveness and an early state of existence, but it is most often used by Western tourists. Traditional is a term used by domestic tourists to describe their culture. The genre of performance at the mayor's ranch was tourist realism, while at Bomas it is national theatre. In the Sundowner performance, the binary that exists in the mayor's ranch does not exist here, as both the Maasai and tourists mingle in one space, whilst in the Mayas two spaces exist, and the Maasai are portrayed as primitive, while here the Maasai is more friendly and adaptable to tourists. Chapter 3. Bronner's main argument in this chapter is to discuss the border zone as a meeting point for the African American tourist who returns to the motherland, and how the Fanti speaking people who and the interaction between them and the people Fanti speaking people, the interaction between the African Americans and the Fancy speaking people who receive them. The tourism in Ghana is becoming a growing industry which has potential to improve and become more than what it is today. Okay, I go over struggle over meaning. With the emergence of tourism in Ghana, its citizens reach that the cities with the emergence of tourism in Ghana, its citizens wish that development would improve the society, especially amongst the young people who hope to benefit from this development by starting a business and offering themselves as tour guides to tourists. The Elmina Castle has different symbolisms and meanings to different people. To the African Americans, it's a sacred place which their ancestors might have passed on their journey to the New World. They do not want it beautified or whitewashed. It symbolizes strength for the slaves that were able to make it to the New World. Whilst to the Ghanaian, it symbolizes the history from the possession of it symbolizes their history from the possession of the castle by the Portuguese to the British who eventually colonized Ghana. Um, uh, okay, there's also a contrast. There's a way that both the Ghanaians and the African Americans want the castle to be portrayed. For the Ghanaians, they want it to be beautified in order for the castle to look attractive to attract more tourists. Um, while for the African American, they do not want such a thing. They don't want it beautified. They want to leave it the way the way it is, so that it will stand as a symbol for the sins of the past and what ex-slaves went through. And it's like it creates like a tension because to the African or to the Ghanaian, they do not understand the experiences that the African Americans have gone through in the diaspora. They do not have that experience, so they really do not understand, and so they can't really empathize or sympathize with them on their plight. And for the African American, the coming back to the motherland is like an imagery of Africa as Eden, and is like a and returning to Emina Castle is like a claim like they have returned back home. So like there are two different the two do not the two subgroups do not really understand why understand they don't really understand each other's viewpoints. Conflicting interpretations. The guides of the castle cater to different groups of people which the castle represents. Which sorry, the guides of the castle cater to different groups of people as the castle has different meanings and symbolism for different subsets of people. For example, the Dutch person is interested in for example, the Dutch person is interested in 2 centuries of the Dutch rule in Elmina Castle, the Dutch cemetery in the town, and the old Dutch colonial buildings. British tourists want to hear about the colonial rule in the Gold Coast. Many Ashanti people have a special interest in the rooms where Asantehene, their king, was imprisoned, as this is as the king is like a symbol of revolt by the Ghanaians against the British colonialism. So it's kind of difficult because like the castle has like different meanings for different people. So like there cannot be one master narrative of the castle. Um So the guides attend to the specific needs of each tour group. The Ghanaian government decided that by expanding the image of the castle to serve both the needs of African Americans and Europe, the economy will benefit, while some people believe that the castle is being whitewashed to meet the predator images of the castle by the Western tourists. The representation of slavery. The Rock Persons who provide a welcome party for the African Americans, which is one Africa production team, believe that a binary exists between the Ghanaians and the African Americans, as Ghanaians classify themselves as Ghanaians classified African Americans as foreigners, while a Nigerian is seen as a stranger. They believe that Ghanaians should be educated. The Ghanaian guys should be educated on the on the African American experience in the diaspora, in order for them to understand the viewpoint of the African American. African Americans experience racism from Ghanaians, e.g., for example, attending to white people before the African American, which I stated that it is not this attitude is not synonymous with Ghana alone. It is it's synonymous to my country as well, Nigerian, but it is not like a preferential treatment to like it is not like racism against only the African American. No, it is also like racism against also the local, which I am, because definitely they still the traders still attend to the white person before they would attend to me, because I don't know. I think probably for financial purposes, and they feel like probably they would gain the loyalty of the white person and and have a customer, and probably they I don't know why they do that. um okay, so who owns the castle? There are many people who have been excluded from the castle. There is a divide of who owns the castle, because there are different people who claim that they have different stakes to the castle. The chiefs, the high chiefs in Elmina, who claim that they have been there for centuries, and that the castle the they were there when the war between the Asantehene and the British people started, and it had to do the war started because of the stake on land, and they feel that with modernity and the passing of imperialism, British imperialism, the government does not involve them on any touristic things that they want to do. Instead, the government just goes ahead and does it without consulting them or knowing whether it is okay to go about this activity or not. So they feel like they have a stake to the castle. And then also we have donor agencies, like Brona stated that when you go to the castle you see so many donor agencies, so many foreign bodies like the UN, like the university, the academia here in the western world, who are donating to help in the reconstruction of the castle. Even the Ghanaian government is not really mentioned as one of the owners or donors of helping in the reconstruction of the castle, because the Ghanaian government also relies on donor foreign bodies, foreign agencies, to help with the reconstruction of the castle. So there is a great divide on who owns the castle. Okay, so also we discussed the factors that 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 cause the revival of cultures. So we studied such factors such as the emergence of Christianity, the removal of high chiefs, traditional high chiefs. So all these festivals which were done before British colonialism in West Africa have been reduced to the minimum due to all these factors. So authenticity cannot really be applied in these festivals due to these factors. Okay, stage authenticity. McConnell states that authenticity is a social construct that is intentionally staged for tourists. He argued that not all tourists are interested in the authenticity of their tourist activities or performance provided to them. McConnell cites in Goffman's theory of the self. In tourist performance, the self is presented as the front stage and backstage. The backstage consists of the kitchen, storerooms, and boiler rooms, whilst the front stage is the living room, office, and hotel lounge, which are social performances. McKenna argued that in order to enforce social realism, mystification is applied. Mystification is used to present a social reality of what people think should be the ideal. Like, I just thought about it when I was reading this article. When I was a child in my house, I think till now we still perform backstage and front stage, because in my house my mother would not allow a visitor come into our kitchen because our kitchen was the backstage. You don't need to see anything in the backstage, so the visitor was only allowed within the border of the living room and dining room, which was the front stage, which my mother wanted you to see as a performance. So I guess that is an example of a backstage and front stage performance that government was talking about. And so with when mystification is lost when a tourist like penetrates the backstage in the backstage in tourism. We cannot determine exactly what is authentic and inauthentic. It's all due to front and backstage divisions. And authenticity is actually something that depends on the individual and how they want to act. There's no straight rule on what is authenticity in tourism performance, I guess. Thank you, Dr. Vaughn.